The old Pendleton estate stood like a fortress against the rolling hills, its towering iron gates and sprawling gardens whispering tales of wealth and secrecy. For Maria, the housemaid, it was just a place of work, a grand stage where she played a silent role. At 22, she had grown accustomed to the monotony of dusting antique furniture, scrubbing marble floors, and navigating the icy silence of her employer, Mrs. Evelyn Pendleton. Maria's shift that fateful day started like any other. She arrived early, tying her dark curls into a neat bun and donning her simple uniform. But as she polished the ornate banisters, she couldn't ignore the peculiar tension in the air. The staff whispered in hushed tones about a locked door on the third floor, the room no one was allowed to enter. "Don't even look at it," the head butler, Mr. Graves, had warned sternly. "Mrs. Pendleton has made it clear that the third floor is off limits to everyone." Maria, however, had always been curious. She had once glimpsed the room from afar, its door decorated with intricate carvings of vines and roses. Why would a house so meticulously kept have a forbidden room? Later that evening, after the house fell quiet and Mrs. Pendleton retreated to her study, Maria found herself wandering. The dim light of her candle flickered as she climbed the winding staircase, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Her heart thumped louder with each step. Standing before the door, she hesitated. She reached out, her fingers grazing the cold brass handle. Just as she was about to withdraw, she noticed something, a glimmer of light escaping from beneath the door. Someone had been here recently. As she leaned closer, the faint scent of lavender and parchment tickled her nose. Her hand moved instinctively to test the handle, and to her shock, it turned. The door creaked open, revealing a room that was both mesmerizing and haunting. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes and trinkets from distant lands. At the center stood an ornate desk, and atop it lay an old diary, its leather cover cracked and weathered with age. A brass key rested on its spine, as though inviting her to unlock its secrets. Maria's pulse quickened as she stepped inside. The room seemed frozen in time, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. She approached the desk, her trembling hands hovering over the diary. Should she open it? What right did she have to invade her employer's privacy? But then she thought of the stories she had overheard, the whispered rumors about Mrs. Pendleton's late husband and the strange circumstances of his death. Against her better judgment, Maria opened the diary, revealing the first page. The words written in bold ink were enough to freeze her in place. "To the one who finds this, know that my life is not what it seems. The truth lies within these pages, and if you are reading this, then you are already part of it." Maria's candle flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Her breath hitched as she turned the next page, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Maria's hands trembled as she turned the pages, her pulse racing with each word. The diary's ink had faded with time, but its secrets burned vividly on the pages. The next entry read, "Evelyn, you must trust no one. The walls of this house have ears, and the people within it have motives darker than the night. If I do not return, the truth must come to light. But tread carefully. Your life may depend on it." Maria's brow furrowed. These weren't just reflections of a grieving widow. They felt like warnings, urgent, fearful. What had Mrs. Pendleton been hiding? As she continued reading, the entries grew more disjointed, as if the writer had been unraveling. One passage stood out. "He betrayed me. The man I loved, the father of my child. Harold's lies have cast a shadow over this house, and I fear I am no longer safe. But I will find a way to protect what's mine." Maria's heart sank. A child? Mrs. Pendleton had no children, or so everyone believed. The housemaids had whispered once about Evelyn's husband, Harold Pendleton, a shrewd businessman who had died in an accident years ago. Could this diary be pointing to something more sinister? Just then, Maria froze. A faint sound echoed from the hallway, a creak of floorboards. She quickly closed the diary and extinguished her candle, her breath shallow and quick. Someone was coming. The footsteps drew closer, slow and deliberate. Maria ducked behind a large armchair, clutching the diary to her chest. Her heart thundered as the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. It was Mrs. Pendleton herself, her sharp features cloaked in shadow. Her eyes scanned the room, suspicion etched into her face. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice cold and commanding. Maria didn't dare move. She pressed herself tighter against the chair, praying the darkness would conceal her. Mrs. Pendleton moved to the desk, her hand brushing the diary's leather cover. For a moment, Maria thought she might pick it up, but instead, Evelyn let out a sigh and turned toward the door. As she left, she muttered under her breath, "Some things are better left buried." Maria waited until the sound of footsteps disappeared entirely before emerging from her hiding place. She clutched the diary tightly, her mind reeling. She needed to know more. Who was the child Evelyn spoke of? And what was the truth about Harold Pendleton's death? The answers were here, within these pages, but Maria would have to unravel them before Evelyn discovered her betrayal. Maria sat on the edge of her small cot in the servants' quarters, the diary open in her lap. The flickering light of a single lantern illuminated the weathered pages. Every line she read pulled her deeper into a web of secrets she hadn't imagined existed. Harold thought he could control everything. The business, my life, even the fate of our child. But he underestimated me. I will not let him destroy what little good remains in this world. If something happens to me, look to the safe. The combination is our anniversary. Maria's mind raced. A safe? Where? She'd never seen one in the house, but she had mostly been confined to the lower floors. The thought of discovering something so personal both terrified and thrilled her. What could be inside? Flipping through more pages, Maria's unease deepened. The diary described Harold Pendleton in a way that clashed sharply with the genteel image presented in the portraits that hung throughout the estate. He was a manipulative and cold-hearted man who cared more for power than people. Evelyn's words painted him as a man capable of cruelty, both in business and in his personal life. One particular passage chilled Maria to the core. I was a fool to believe he loved me. Harold's accident was no accident. He was silenced before he could destroy the lives of others. But the blood on my hands will haunt me forever. I did what I had to, for the child. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Blood on her hands. Evelyn had always been a stern but poised woman, seemingly incapable of violence. Could it be true? Had she been involved in Harold's death? The words blurred before Maria's eyes as questions swirled in her mind. Who was the child Evelyn mentioned? Was it possible they were still alive, hidden from the world? If the safe held the answers, she had to find it. But there was no time to think. A sharp knock at the door jolted her out of her thoughts. She quickly shoved the diary under her mattress. "Maria?" It was Mr. Graves, the butler, his voice stern as always. "Yes, Mr. Graves," she called out, trying to steady her voice. "Mrs. Pendleton has requested you in the library immediately." Maria swallowed hard. Why now? Had Evelyn discovered the diary was missing? She smoothed her apron and tried to calm her racing heart. As she walked down the long corridors, the weight of the secrets she carried felt heavier with every step. When she entered the library, Evelyn was seated by the fire, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't look up as Maria approached. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn finally met her gaze, her sharp eyes studying Maria with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "I've been noticing changes around here," Evelyn said, her tone measured. "Do you have something you'd like to tell me, Maria?" Maria's stomach dropped. Evelyn's words were vague, but the accusation in her eyes was clear. I don't know what you mean, ma'am," Maria stammered, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. Evelyn's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course not. That will be all." Dismissed, Maria turned and walked out of the room, her knees shaking. But one thing was certain. Evelyn was beginning to suspect. Maria had to act fast. Whatever the safe contained, it was her only chance to uncover the truth before Evelyn caught on. Maria's heart pounded as she hurried back to her quarters. Evelyn's piercing gaze had felt like an accusation, but there was no turning back now. She had the diary, the clue about the safe, and a growing determination to uncover the truth. The combination, their anniversary. But what date was that? Maria had no idea. She would have to search the house for clues, quietly and quickly, before Evelyn's suspicions grew. Later that night, when the mansion was cloaked in silence, Maria slipped into the study where Evelyn often worked. The room was dominated by an imposing mahogany desk, its surface neatly organized with papers, pens, and a single photograph in an ornate silver frame. Maria's eyes locked onto the photo. It was a black and white image of a younger Evelyn standing next to a man who must have been Harold. They were smiling, their hands clasped. Below the image, an engraving read, Harold and Evelyn Pendleton, married June 12, 1985. Maria committed the date to memory. Her hands trembled as she replaced the photo and turned her attention to the desk drawers. She found ledgers, correspondence, and receipts, but no mention of a safe. Just as she was about to give up, a faint sound startled her. The distant creak of floorboards echoed through the hallway. Someone was awake. Maria extinguished her lantern and ducked behind the curtains. She held her breath as the study door creaked open. "Who's there?" a voice called out. It wasn't Evelyn. It was Mr. Graves. Maria's chest tightened. She couldn't be caught now, not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. Through a gap in the curtains, she saw the butler enter, holding a candle that cast eerie shadows on the walls. He glanced around the room, his sharp eyes scanning every corner. After a moment, he muttered under his breath, "Damn rats," and turned to leave. Maria waited until his footsteps faded before slipping out of the study. Her nerves were frayed, but she wasn't giving up. She needed to find that safe. The following evening, Maria got her chance. Evelyn was hosting a dinner party in the grand dining room, entertaining a group of wealthy guests with laughter and wine. The staff was busy serving dishes, leaving Maria relatively unnoticed. She seized the opportunity to sneak into Evelyn's private suite. The room was luxurious, with heavy drapes, a canopied bed, and gilded furniture. Maria searched carefully, her hands trembling as she checked behind paintings, inside closets, and under furniture. Finally, her eyes landed on a tall bookshelf that seemed out of place. Pushing aside a row of books, she discovered a hidden panel. Behind it was a small safe, its steel door gleaming in the dim light. Maria's heart raced as she spun the combination lock, 061285. With a soft click, the safe opened. Inside, she found a stack of documents, a bundle of letters, and a small velvet box. Her hands hovered over the contents, unsure where to start. She picked up one of the letters, its paper yellowed with age. The words written inside made her blood run cold. "To my dearest Evelyn, if anything happens to me, promise you will protect the truth. Harold's plans go beyond what I can stop. For the sake of our child, you must ensure that no one discovers what lies beneath Pendleton Estate." What did Harold mean by "what lies beneath"? And why was Evelyn so desperate to keep it hidden? Maria didn't have time to ponder. She heard footsteps approaching, and this time, they were unmistakably Evelyn's. She shoved the documents back into the safe, closed it, and hurried out of the suite just as the doorknob began to turn. She had found the safe, but the real mystery was only just beginning. Maria's heart raced as she retreated to her quarters, clutching the velvet box she had snatched from the safe at the last moment. She didn't dare open it until she was alone, with the door locked and the faint hum of the house settling into stillness. The box's delicate exterior hinted at its importance. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Inside was a locket, gold, intricately designed, and heavy for its size. Maria opened it carefully, revealing two small portraits. A smiling Evelyn on one side, and a child, a boy no older than 5, on the other. A wave of confusion washed over her. Who was the boy? Evelyn had never mentioned a child, and no photographs of him hung in the house. Why was he hidden away, even in Evelyn's private life? Beneath the locket was a folded note. Maria unfolded it, her breath hitching as she read. Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means Harold's plans have taken a darker turn. I've left everything you need to protect our son in the tunnels beneath the estate. The entrance is in the east garden, beneath the old fountain. Trust no one, not even the staff. Tunnels? Maria's mind raced. The Pendleton estate was massive, but she had never imagined it concealed something as mysterious as underground passages. Why would Harold's plans require such secrecy? As the clock struck midnight, Maria resolved to investigate. The east garden was vast and overgrown in parts, but she knew where the old fountain stood, hidden among the hedges that had fallen into disrepair. She crept out of the house, careful to avoid the watchful eyes of Mr. Graves or the other staff. The cold night air bit at her skin as she crossed the lawn, her lantern casting long shadows across the manicured grounds. The fountain came into view, its once majestic form now cracked and moss-covered. Maria knelt beside it, searching for any sign of an entrance. Her fingers brushed against the edge of a stone panel set into the base of the fountain. With effort, she pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A chill ran down her spine. She hesitated for a moment, her lantern trembling in her hand. Whatever was down there had been hidden for a reason. But the boy in the locket, the child Evelyn had fought so hard to protect, deserved to have his story uncovered. Maria descended the stairs, the air growing colder and damper with each step. The passageway smelled of earth and mildew, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed around her. At the bottom, she found a small chamber. The walls were lined with shelves filled with documents, ledgers, and boxes. In the center of the room stood a wooden crate, its lid slightly ajar. Maria approached cautiously, lifting the lid to reveal its contents. Inside were more letters, stacks of money bound with string, and photographs. One image caught her eye immediately, a young boy standing with Harold and Evelyn. The boy's face bore a striking resemblance to Evelyn's, but his eyes were cold and calculating, a stark contrast to the innocence of the earlier portrait. Another letter explained everything. To whomever finds this, my son is the heir to more than just the Pendleton fortune. He is the key to Harold's empire, a network built on deception and corruption. Harold wanted to groom him to continue his legacy, but I couldn't let that happen. I sent him away, erased his existence from this house. But Harold's reach is long, and I fear I haven't done enough to protect him. Maria's hands trembled as she realized the implications. Evelyn's son wasn't just hidden, he was in danger. Harold's empire was larger and more sinister than she had imagined. As she sifted through the letters, a sound from the staircase made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Maria quickly doused her lantern, plunging the chamber into darkness. She pressed herself against the cold, damp wall, clutching the locket in one hand and a stack of letters in the other. The faint glow of a lantern illuminated the staircase as the footsteps grew louder. "Who's down here?" a voice called out sharply. It was Mr. Graves. His tone was firm, but Maria detected an edge of urgency, even fear. Her pulse quickened. How did he know about this place? Was he part of Harold's schemes, or was he working for Evelyn? Questions swirled in her mind, but there was no time to ponder. Mr. Graves entered the chamber, his lantern casting eerie shadows across the shelves. His eyes scanned the room, narrowing when he saw the open crate. "Maria," he said softly, as though speaking to the air. "I know you're here. Come out." Maria remained silent, her back pressed tightly against the wall. She didn't trust him. Not yet. "You've stumbled into something dangerous," he continued, his voice lowering. "This isn't just about Evelyn or Harold. There are people who would do anything to keep these secrets buried." If you want to survive, you'll listen to me. A part of Maria wanted to believe him, but the other part remembered the countless times he had dismissed her as just another servant. Why would he care about her now? Graves sighed heavily, setting the lantern on the floor. Fine. Stay hidden. But know this. Harold's empire didn't die with him. There are still men out there looking for the boy, and if they find out you've uncovered this. He trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Maria's breath hitched. If what Graves said was true, then simply being in this chamber had put her in grave danger. But why was he warning her? Graves picked up the lantern and moved toward the staircase. If you're smart, you'll put everything back and forget you ever found this place. Maria waited until his footsteps faded before emerging from her hiding spot. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Graves's warning was clear, but she couldn't ignore the evidence she had uncovered. Someone had to know the truth about Harold's crimes and about Evelyn's son. Maria carefully gathered as many documents as she could carry, tucking them into the folds of her apron. She climbed the staircase slowly, her senses on high alert. The house above was quiet, but she knew she couldn't risk returning to her quarters just yet. Instead, she made her way to the small writing room near the servants' wing. It was rarely used and had a lock on the door, a temporary safe haven. Once inside, Maria lit a single candle and began sifting through the documents. Each piece of paper painted a more horrifying picture of Harold Pendleton's empire. Fraud, blackmail, and bribery were only the surface. There were records of hidden accounts, offshore investments, and connections to dangerous individuals. But one document stood out. It was a letter addressed to Harold from an unknown associate. The boy must be found. He is the key to unlocking the Pendleton legacy. Without him, the estate will crumble, and so will our control. Do whatever it takes. Maria's blood ran cold. The boy, Evelyn's son, wasn't just a pawn in Harold's schemes. He was a target. Before Maria could process the implications, a sharp knock at the door shattered her concentration. "Maria!" A familiar voice called. It was Evelyn. Maria froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She quickly gathered the papers, stuffing them into her apron, and blew out the candle. "Open the door!" Evelyn commanded, her tone sharp and unyielding. Maria hesitated, her mind racing. Evelyn knew. She had to. But how much did she know? And how far would she go to protect her secrets? Bracing herself, Maria unlocked the door and opened it just enough to face her employer. Evelyn's icy gaze bore into her, but her expression was unreadable. "We need to talk," Evelyn said, stepping inside before Maria could respond. She glanced around the room, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "I assume you found the diary?" Maria's stomach dropped. She didn't respond, her silence betraying her guilt. Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. "I knew it the moment I saw you earlier. You looked different, like someone carrying a burden they don't understand." Maria swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to." "Save it," Evelyn interrupted, her tone curt. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're in over your head, Maria. You have no idea what kind of men are involved in this. They'll stop at nothing to protect Harold's legacy." "Why hide your son?" Maria blurted out before she could stop herself. "Why send him away if you wanted to protect him?" Evelyn's face softened for a brief moment, a flicker of pain crossing her features. "Because keeping him here would have destroyed him," she said quietly. "Harold wanted to mold him into his image, to inherit the empire he built on lies and blood. I couldn't let that happen." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. "But they're still looking for him. They know he exists." Evelyn's expression hardened again. "Which is why you need to stop digging. If they find out you've been in the tunnels, You won't live long enough to regret it. Maria's resolve wavered, but she couldn't ignore the weight of what she had discovered. And if I don't stop? She asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Then I can't protect you. Maria stared at Evelyn, her words hanging heavy in the air. I can't protect you. Those were not empty threats. Evelyn's icy demeanor and cryptic warnings told Maria that she had ventured too far into dangerous territory. I didn't mean to, Maria started, but Evelyn raised a hand to silence her. Stop, Evelyn said, her voice sharp. What's done is done. The question now is, what do you intend to do with what you've learned? Maria hesitated. Part of her wanted to run, to leave the estate, and forget everything she had uncovered. But the other part, the part that couldn't ignore the boy in the locket or the haunting letters in the diary, knew she had to see this through. I want to help, Maria said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. Your son deserves to be safe. And if Harold's empire is still out there, someone has to expose it. Evelyn studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Maria's surprise, a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. You're braver than I gave you credit for, Evelyn said. But bravery alone won't keep you alive. If you truly want to help, you'll have to trust me, and that won't be easy. Maria nodded, unsure if she was making a pact with an ally or walking into a trap. What do we do? Evelyn walked to the window, her gaze distant as she spoke. The documents you found in the tunnels, they're only part of the story. Harold had partners, powerful men who won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their legacy. They think my son is the key to rebuilding their empire. Why? Maria asked, her curiosity outweighing her fear. Because Harold left everything to him, Evelyn explained, turning back to face Maria. The money, the properties, the secrets, it's all tied to my son. As long as he stays hidden, their plans are on hold. But if they find him... She trailed off, her expression grim. Maria swallowed hard. Where is he? Evelyn hesitated, her composure faltering for the first time. He's safe, for now. But I can't keep him hidden forever. If those men discover what you found, they'll use you to get to him. That's why I need you to leave. Maria blinked, stunned. Leave? But listen to me, Evelyn said, her tone firm. You've uncovered too much, and they'll come looking for answers. If you're here when they arrive, they'll find you, and they'll kill you. Maria's chest tightened. Evelyn's words felt like a death sentence, but she couldn't abandon the boy, not after everything she had learned. There has to be another way, Maria said, her voice trembling. We can fight them. We can expose the truth. Evelyn shook her head. You don't understand how powerful these men are. They have influence in places you can't even imagine. If you try to fight them, you'll lose. Maria took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Then teach me. Show me what I need to do to protect your son. Evelyn stared at her, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. If you're serious about this, you'll have to be prepared to risk everything. Once we start, there's no going back. Maria nodded, her hands trembling but her heart steady. I'm ready. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Then listen carefully. There's someone we need to find. Someone who can help us. His name is Victor, and he was one of Harold's closest allies before they had a falling out. If anyone knows how to dismantle Harold's empire, it's him. Where is he? Maria asked. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. That's the hard part. He disappeared years ago. But if he's alive, there's one place he might have gone. A cabin deep in the woods outside town. Harold used it as a retreat. And Victor knew about it. Maria's mind raced. She had never ventured far from the estate, but if Victor held the key to protecting Evelyn's son, she had no choice. Evelyn handed Maria a folded map. This will guide you to the cabin. But be careful. If Victor is there, he won't trust you easily, and neither will the people who might be watching him. Maria nodded, tucking the map into her apron. I'll find him. Evelyn placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm. For your sake, I hope you do. And Maria, don't trust anyone. With that, Evelyn turned and left the room, leaving Maria alone with the weight of her mission. Maria clutched the locket tightly, the boy's innocent face etched in her mind. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant risking her life. The journey to the cabin felt like a descent into another world. Maria left the estate under the cover of darkness, clutching the folded map Evelyn had given her. The moonlit countryside stretched endlessly before her, the cool night air carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The path marked on the map wound through dense woods, its twists and turns obscured by overgrown vegetation. Maria's lantern cast eerie shadows among the trees, each rustle of leaves making her jump. Despite her fear, she pressed on, driven by the image of the boy in the locket and the weight of Evelyn's trust. Hours passed before she spotted the faint outline of a cabin in the distance. Its silhouette loomed against the dark sky, the windows dark and unwelcoming. Maria approached cautiously, her steps silent on the mossy ground. The cabin was small and weathered, its wooden exterior cracked and faded with age. A single lantern flickered inside, its light barely visible through the grimy windows. Maria hesitated before knocking on the door, her hand trembling as it hovered over the rough wood. Thud, thud, thud. The sound echoed in the still night. For a moment there was no response. Then, heavy footsteps approached, and the door creaked open just enough to reveal a sliver of a man's face. He was older, with sharp features, and eyes that seemed to pierce through her. His graying hair was unkempt, and his expression was one of suspicion. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and gravelly. Maria swallowed hard. I'm here on behalf of Evelyn Pendleton. She said you might be able to help." The man's eyes narrowed at the mention of Evelyn's name. He glanced around, as if checking for anyone who might have followed her, then opened the door wider. "Come in, quickly." Maria stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimly lit interior. The cabin was sparse, with a small table, a few chairs, and a single cot in the corner. Papers were scattered across the table, and a rifle leaned against the wall. The man motioned for her to sit. "I'm Victor," he said gruffly. "If Evelyn sent you, things must be worse than I thought." Maria nodded, clutching the locket in her hand. "She said you know about Harold's empire, and the people still looking for her son. She needs your help to stop them." Victor's face darkened at the mention of Harold. "That man was a snake," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "He used people, destroyed lives, and built his empire on lies. Evelyn was the only one who ever stood up to him, and she paid the price for it." "She said you had a falling out," Maria ventured cautiously. Victor let out a bitter laugh. "You could call it that. Harold found out I wasn't going to play along with his schemes anymore. He tried to have me killed. I've been hiding ever since." Maria's heart sank. "Then why would Evelyn think you can help her now?" Victor leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "Because I know things Harold never wanted anyone else to know. Secrets that could bring his entire empire crashing down. But using them is dangerous. It'll paint a target on anyone involved, including you." Maria took a deep breath. "I don't care about the danger. Evelyn's son deserves to be safe, and those men deserve to pay for what they've done." Victor studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. if you're serious about this. There's something you need to see." He stood and walked to a small chest in the corner of the room. Unlocking it, he retrieved a thick folder and placed it on the table. "This is everything I have on Harold's empire. Names, locations, bank accounts. It's all here." Maria opened the folder, her eyes widening as she scanned the documents. The evidence was damning: bribes to government officials, records of illegal deals, and the identities of Harold's most trusted associates. Victor pointed to one name in particular. "This man, David Cross. He's the one pulling the strings now. If we can expose him, the entire operation will fall apart. But he's ruthless. If he finds out what we're planning—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Maria understood. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping in. Victor's gaze hardened. "First, we need to make sure Evelyn's son stays hidden. If Cross gets to him, none of this will matter." Maria nodded, determination filling her chest. She had come too far to turn back now. Together, they would bring down the legacy Harold had left behind and protect the boy who was at the center of it all. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation and peril. Maria and Victor worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of Harold's empire and formulating a plan to expose David Cross. Every move had to be calculated, every risk weighed against the danger of discovery. Maria had never felt more out of her depth, yet her resolve never wavered. She thought often of Evelyn's son, hidden away somewhere, unaware of the storm swirling around him. She was fighting for his future, a life free from the shadow of Harold's sins. Victor eventually arranged a clandestine meeting with a trusted journalist willing to publish the evidence. It was the final step in their plan. The journalist, a man named Samuel Blake, had a reputation for taking down powerful figures, and he agreed to help, understanding the gravity of the situation. But Cross's network was vast, and word of their efforts had spread. The night before the meeting, Victor and Maria received a chilling message. A single note slipped under the cabin door, reading, "Stop now, or neither of you will make it to tomorrow." Maria's hands shook as she read the note, but Victor dismissed it with a grim laugh. "They're scared," he said. "That means we're close." The next morning, Maria and Victor set out for the meeting point, a secluded spot on the outskirts of the city. The drive was tense, both of them scanning the horizon for signs of danger. Victor clutched the folder of evidence tightly, his knuckles white. When they arrived, Samuel Blake was already there, leaning against his car with a look of cautious optimism. "You've got the goods?" he asked. Victor handed him the folder. "This is everything. Use it wisely." Samuel flipped through the pages, his eyes widening as he took in the scope of the evidence. "This is monumental," he said, his voice low. "When this goes public, it'll destroy Cross and everyone connected to him." Relief flooded Maria's chest, but it was short-lived. A sudden sound, a car engine roaring in the distance, made them all turn. A black SUV sped toward them, its windows tinted. Maria's heart leapt into her throat. "They found us!" Victor grabbed her arm. "Run!" The next moments were a blur of chaos. Samuel took off with the folder, disappearing into the trees, while Victor and Maria sprinted in the opposite direction. The SUV skidded to a halt, and armed men poured out, shouting orders to find them. Maria's lungs burned as she ran, Victor leading the way. The dense forest offered some cover, but the men were relentless, their shouts growing louder. Just when Maria thought they would be caught, Victor pulled her into a hidden crevice in the rocks. They crouched in silence, their breaths shallow as the men searched nearby. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the voices faded, and the men moved on. Victor and Maria stayed hidden until they were certain the danger had passed. When they emerged, Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said, his voice filled with a rare softness. "Now we wait. Samuel has what he needs to finish this." The next days were a blur of tension and anticipation. Then, one morning, the news broke. Explosive scandal rocks Pendleton legacy. David Cross and Associates exposed in criminal empire. Maria stared at the television in disbelief as reporters detailed the web of corruption and deceit that had been uncovered. Cross and several others were arrested, and Harold's empire began to crumble. Back at the estate, Evelyn watched the news with a quiet satisfaction. Maria returned to find her in the library, a faint smile on her lips. "You did it," Evelyn said, her voice softer than Maria had ever heard it. "We did it," Maria replied. "But your son, is he safe now?" Evelyn nodded. "For now, yes. With Cross gone, his immediate danger has passed. But his life will never be truly normal. Harold's shadow will linger, no matter what we've done." Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket. "He should have this," she said, handing it to Evelyn. Evelyn's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she took the locket. "Thank you, Maria, for everything." Maria smiled, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. She had walked into the shadows of the Pendleton estate and emerged stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. As she packed her belongings to leave the estate, Maria felt a sense of peace. She had done her part, not just for Evelyn and her son, but for herself. As she walked away from the towering gates of the Pendleton estate for the last time, she carried with her the lessons of courage and resilience, and the knowledge that even the smallest acts of bravery could change lives forever.